The crystal spires of the Vega Prima embassy glittered under the double sunset, casting prismatic shadows across the grand atrium where Captain Jonah Wells stood, tugging uncomfortably at the high collar of his diplomatic uniform. The year 3242 had not been kind to his career. What had begun as a promising path in xenoanthropology had taken an unexpected detour into reluctant diplomacy after his groundbreaking paper on Aurelian social structures caught the attention of the Terran diplomatic corps. "You'll survive this posting," he muttered to himself, watching the alien dignitaries glide across the polished floor with enviable grace. The Aurelians, with their luminescent skin and elongated limbs, made humans look crude by comparison. Their rigid social hierarchy, centered around biological purity, had fascinated him academically. Living among them was proving considerably less enjoyable. Across the room, Lady Seraphine Aurelia moved with the fluid precision of her species. Heir to House Luminar, one of the 12 great houses of the Aurelian Dominion, she commanded attention without seeking it. Her silver-violet eyes, characteristic of the highest noble lineage, surveyed the gathering with scientific detachment. Unlike other nobles who viewed diplomatic functions as tedious obligations, Seraphine approached them as anthropological studies. Not unlike Jonah himself. Staring again, "Captain," the voice of Dr. Leon Thorpe, the embassy's chief medical officer, broke Jonah's concentration. "One day, she'll notice." Jonah shook his head. "Just observing. Professional curiosity. Is that what they're calling it these days?" Leon smiled, handing him a flute of iridescent liquid. "Try the Aurelian nectar. Supposedly it's a rare vintage from their homeworld's southern hemisphere." The drink smelled of something between jasmine and electric circuits, an odd combination that wasn't entirely unpleasant. As Jonah took a cautious sip, he caught Seraphine looking in his direction. For the briefest moment, their eyes met across the crowded atrium. She inclined her head slightly, the equivalent of a formal Aurelian acknowledgement, before returning to her conversation with an elder statesman. "She knows who you are," Leon noted. "Your paper on their caste system caused quite a stir among their scientific community." "I doubt that's a good thing," Jonah replied. "The Aurelians aren't exactly known for welcoming outsider perspectives on their social structures." Leon shrugged. "You'd be surprised. Not all Aurelians share the conservative views of their leadership. Lady Seraphine, in particular, is known for her progressive research at the Luminar Institute." Before Jonah could respond, a chime echoed through the atrium, signaling the formal commencement of the diplomatic dinner. Attendees began moving toward the adjacent dining hall, a cavernous space dominated by a single crystalline table that seemed to grow organically from the floor. Jonah found himself seated halfway down the table's length, directly across from Lady Seraphine, a placement that could not be coincidental in the meticulously planned Aurelian protocol. As the first course appeared, delicacies crafted to accommodate the varied physiologies of a dozen different species. Seraphine addressed him directly for the first time. "Your analysis of our genetic-based social stratification was unexpectedly insightful, Captain Wells." Her voice carried the melodic quality common to her species, but with a precision that suggested careful study of human intonation patterns. Jonah nearly choked on his water. "You've read my work, Lady Aurelia?" "I've analyzed it thoroughly," she replied, the faintest hint of amusement flickering across her features. "Your conclusions regarding the artificial nature of our supposed biological imperatives align with my own research, though I would not admit as much in less neutral territory." For the next hour, their conversation flowed with surprising ease, touching on topics from comparative xenobiology to the philosophical implications of interspecies cultural exchange. Around them, the diplomatic dinner progressed through its carefully choreographed courses. But Jonah barely noticed the exotic foods placed before him, captivated instead by this unexpected intellectual connection. Perhaps you would consider visiting the Luminar Institute, Seraphine suggested as dessert was served. I could arrange a private tour of our research facilities. Your perspective might prove valuable to certain projects currently under development. I'd be honored, Jonah replied, genuinely intrigued by the opportunity. The Luminar Institute was renowned throughout the galaxy for its advanced biological research, but access for non-Aurelians was extremely limited. As Seraphine began to elaborate on the arrangement, something changed in her expression. A flicker of confusion crossed her features, followed by a grimace of pain. Her luminescent skin, normally radiant with an inner glow, suddenly dimmed. "Who, Lady Aurelia?" Jonah leaned forward, concerned. "Are you all right?" Her only response was a sharp intake of breath as she clutched the edge of the table. Then, without warning, she collapsed, her slender form crumpling with unsettling grace. The dining hall erupted in chaos. Jonah vaulted over the table, diplomatic protocol forgotten as he reached Seraphine's side. Her skin had taken on an alarming grayish tint, the natural luminescence fading rapidly. "Get Dr. Thorpe," he shouted to a nearby human aide before turning back to Seraphine. Her eyes fluttered open momentarily, focusing on his face with startling clarity before closing again. "Tarka." Seraphine's personal guard, a broad-shouldered Aurelian with militant posture, pushed through the gathering crowd, his expression grim. "Stand aside, human," he commanded. "She needs medical attention," Jonah insisted, reluctant to move. "Our physicians will attend to her," Tarka replied, though his tone lacked conviction. Jonah recognized the conflicted look in the guard's eyes, duty warring with genuine concern for his charge. Before their standoff could escalate, Dr. Leon Thorpe arrived, medical scanner already in hand. "What happened?" she demanded, kneeling beside Seraphine's prone form. "She collapsed mid-conversation," Jonah explained, moving aside to give Leon room to work. The scanner hummed as Leon passed it over Seraphine's body, its holographic display flickering with rapidly changing biometric data. Leon's expression shifted from professional concern to outright shock. "This can't be right," she muttered, recalibrating the device. "What is it?" Jonah pressed. Leanne looked up, her face pale. "We need to get her to the medical bay immediately and quietly." With Tarka's reluctant assistance, they managed to transport Seraphine to the embassy's medical facility without attracting undue attention. The diplomatic dinner continuing in subdued confusion behind them. In the sterile confines of the examination room, Leon ran more comprehensive scans while Jonah and Tarka waited in tense silence. After what seemed an eternity, Leon emerged from the inner chamber, her expression grave. "Well?" Jonah demanded. "Her Lady Aurelia is pregnant," Leon stated flatly. Tarka stiffened, his hand moving instinctively to the ceremonial weapon at his hip. "Impossible. The House Luminar bloodline is strictly controlled. No authorized conception has been scheduled. Nevertheless," Leon continued, "she is carrying an embryo approximately 3 weeks into development. And there's more." She hesitated, glancing between Jonah and Tarka. "The embryo is hybrid, half Aurelian, half human." The silence that followed was deafening. Jonah felt the floor tilt beneath him as the implications sank in. "That's biologically impossible," he finally managed. "Aurelian and human genetic structures are fundamentally incompatible." "Apparently not," Leon replied. "I've run the analysis 3 times. The embryo bears genetic markers from both species and—" She paused again. "The human DNA is a match for yours." "Jonah." Tarka's weapon was drawn now, the ceremonial blade humming with dangerous energy. Explain yourself, human, he growled. Jonah raised his hands, mind racing. We haven't. This is impossible. Not entirely impossible, came a weak voice from the doorway. Seraphine stood there, leaning heavily against the frame, her luminescence still dimmed but her eyes clear and focused. Though the probability was calculated at less than 0.03%, Jonah moved toward her instinctively, but Tarka blocked his path. Lady Aurelia should not be standing, the guard said, though his weapon remained pointed at Jonah. I am quite capable of determining my own capabilities, Tarka, Seraphine replied, her tone carrying the unmistakable authority of her station despite her weakened state. Lower your weapon. Captain Wells is not to blame, at least. Not entirely. My lady, the law is clear, Tarka insisted. Unauthorized cross-species fertilization is... I am well aware of the law. Seraphine cut him off. But there are factors at play beyond your understanding. She made her way to a chair, sitting with deliberate care. Dr. Thorpe, would you be so kind as to give us privacy? Leanne hesitated. As your physician, I will summon you if my condition changes, Seraphine assured her. Please. After Leanne reluctantly departed, Seraphine turned her attention to Jonah. Do you recall our first meeting, Captain? Jonah frowned. The academic conference on Proxima Station 6 months ago. We spoke briefly after my presentation. And do you remember our handshake? Yes, though it was rather unusual for an Aurelian to offer one. Seraphine nodded. That was no ordinary handshake. The momentary discomfort you felt like a static charge was a sophisticated cellular sampling technique. I extracted a microscopic amount of your genetic material. You... what? Jonah stared at her, incredulous. Why would you... Oh, for research purposes, she explained. My work at the Luminar Institute focuses on interspecies genetic compatibility, research that directly challenges our society's dogma regarding biological purity. Tarka lowered his weapon slightly, his expression troubled. My lady, such research is forbidden. A progress often requires challenging established prohibitions. Tarka. Seraphine straightened in her chair, some of her natural dignity returning despite her condition. The sample was intended solely for laboratory analysis. I never anticipated. She placed a hand over her abdomen. This outcome was never part of the experimental design. Are you saying this pregnancy is the result of some kind of experiment? Jonah asked, struggling to process her explanation. Not intentionally, Seraphine replied. The genetic material was stored in a specialized container within my personal laboratory suite. 3 weeks ago, there was an incidental power surge that compromised containment protocols. I was exposed to multiple samples, including yours. My body's natural reproductive processes must have incorporated the viable material. She met his gaze directly. The probability was infinitesimal. Yet here we are. Jonah ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. So I'm going to be a father because of a laboratory accident? The situation is considerably more complicated than that, Seraphine said grimly. When my mother, Matriarch Kasara, learns of this, she will demand immediate termination of the embryo and a complete political cover-up of the incident. House Luminar's standing within the Dominion depends on the perceived purity of our bloodline. And if you refuse? Jonah asked. Refusal would be unprecedented. Seraphine admitted. No member of the High Houses has ever carried a hybrid child to term. The political consequences would be severe, both for House Luminar and for Earth-Aurelian relations. Tarka finally sheathed his weapon. His expression resigned. The matriarch arrives tomorrow for the seasonal conclave. We cannot hide this from Heror. Physicians will detect the pregnancy immediately during your mandatory health assessment. Seraphine nodded. I am aware, which leaves us very little time to determine our course of action. Our course of action? Jonah repeated. You're including me in this decision? The embryo carries your genetic material, Seraphine stated matter-of-factly. By both human and Aurelian standard, that gives you certain rights and responsibilities. Before Jonah could respond, the medical bay's communication system chimed with an incoming message. Leon's voice came through, tight with urgency. Captain Wells, you need to leave immediately. Matriarch Kasara's advanced security team has just docked. They're conducting preliminary sweeps of the embassy, including the medical facilities. Tarka moved to the door, checking the corridor. The south passage should be clear. I will escort you to your quarters. Captain, wait, Jonah protested, looking to Seraphine. We haven't decided. For now, we proceed with caution. She interrupted. I must appear at the conclave tomorrow as expected. Any deviation would arouse suspicion. We will reconvene once I have assessed my mother's mood and intentions. And the pregnancy? Jonah pressed. Seraphine's hand returned to her abdomen, a gesture so subtle it might have been unconscious. I make no promises, Captain Wells, but I will not act hastily in any regard. She looked up, meeting his eyes with unexpected intensity. Now go. Quickly, as Tarka led him through the labyrinthine back passages of the embassy. Jonah's mind raced with the implications of what he'd learned. An accidental pregnancy. A hybrid child that shouldn't exist. A ruthless matriarch arriving within hours. And at the center of it all, the enigmatic Lady Seraphine, whose true intentions remained as mysterious as the luminescent glow of her alien skin. The seasonal conclave commenced the following morning with the customary display of Aurelian pageantry. The embassy's grand hall had been transformed overnight, its crystalline architecture enhanced with holographic representations of the 12 great houses. House Luminar's sigilla spiral galaxy rendered in violet and silver dominated the eastern wall, a not-so-subtle reminder of their preeminent status. Jonah stood among the human delegation, feeling conspicuously out of place. He had barely slept, his dreams haunted by impossible children with silver-violet eyes. Across the hall, Seraphine had taken her place at the right hand of Matriarch Kasara, who had arrived with the dawn. Even from a distance, the family resemblance was striking, though where Seraphine's features held a certain softness. Her mother's were sharp as cut crystal. You look like hell, Leon whispered, sidling up beside him. Thanks for noticing, Jonah replied dryly. Any word from our mutual friend? Jonah shook his head. Radio silence. Though her guard did escort me through some rather interesting back corridors last night. Tarka? Leon raised an eyebrow. Interesting, he's known for his unwavering loyalty to House Luminar. I think his loyalty may be more specifically directed towards Seraphine, Jonah murmured, watching as the matriarch rose to address the assembly. Kasara Aurelia commanded attention without raising her voice, a skill honed through centuries of political maneuvering. Esteemed representatives of the Dominion and honored guests, she began, her tone musical yet authoritative. We gather under the auspices of the seasonal transition to reaffirm the bonds that unite our great houses and to consider matters of mutual concern with our diverse allies. Her gaze swept briefly over the non-Aurelian delegations, lingering momentarily on the humans. What followed was a masterclass in diplomatic double-speak gracious phrases that, upon closer examination, concealed thinly veiled assertions of Aurelian superiority. Jonah found himself admiring the technical skill while despising the content. As the formal proceedings continued, he noticed something concerning. Seraphine, normally the picture of composure, appeared to be struggling. Her luminescence fluctuated subtly, a sign of physiological stress that would be imperceptible to most observers. Twice. She pressed a hand to her temple, a gesture that might pass for thoughtfulness to the uninitiated. "Something's wrong," Jonah whispered to Leon. The doctor followed his gaze. "The pregnancy is taxing her system. Hybrid gestation isn't something her biology is equipped to handle without medical support. She needs help." Jonah started to move, but Leon gripped his arm. "You can't approach her here, not with the matriarch present." Before Jonah could argue, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A messenger had arrived, bearing what appeared to be urgent news. He approached the matriarch directly, bowing deeply before whispering in her ear. The change in Kasara's demeanor was immediate and chilling. Her luminescence intensified to an almost painful brightness as she turned slowly to look at her daughter. Seraphine met her mother's gaze steadily, though Jonah could see the effort it cost her. "The conclave will recess for 1 hour," Kasara announced, her voice betraying nothing of the storm clearly brewing behind her eyes. "Lady Seraphine and I have a private matter to discuss." As the assembly dispersed in a murmur of speculation, Jonah watched helplessly as Seraphine was led away by her mother, Tarka following at a respectful distance. Their expressions told him everything he needed to know. Kasara had learned of the pregnancy. "What now?" Leon asked. "Now," Jonah replied grimly. "We prepare for the worst." The worst arrived sooner than anticipated, barely 20 minutes into the recess. Jonah's communication device buzzed with an encrypted message. "Medical Bay. Urgent. Tarka," Jonah explained to Leon as they hurried through the embassy corridors. "Something's happened." They found Seraphine lying on an examination table, her luminescence dangerously dim. Tarka stood guard at the door, his expression grim. The matriarch ordered an immediate purge procedure, he explained without preamble. When Lady Seraphine refused, He trailed off, his gaze dropping to the floor. "She tried to force the issue," Seraphine finished weakly, attempting to sit up. "My mother has always been decisive." "She attacked you?" Jonah moved to Seraphine's side, rage building at the thought. "Not physically," Seraphine clarified. "She attempted a neural override, an ancient technique reserved for emergencies when a house member acts against the collective interest. But my shields held." A faint smile touched her lips. "She forgets that I have spent years studying our neural architecture." Leon was already scanning Seraphine, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "The embryo is under stress. Your body is producing antibodies that would be harmless to an Aurelian fetus but are toxic to the hybrid cells." "Can you counteract them?" Jonah asked. "Temporarily, yes, but without a more permanent solution." Leon let the implication hang in the air. "The Luminar Institute," Seraphine said suddenly. "My private laboratory contains equipment specifically designed for cross-species cellular stability. Your mother will have that place locked down by now," Tarka pointed out. "Not all of it," Seraphine countered. "There are sections unknown even to her research spaces I've kept off the official records." Jonah exchanged glances with Leon. "Are you suggesting we break into your family's private research facility?" "I'm suggesting," Seraphine replied, her voice strengthening with resolve, "that I have a right to determine the fate of my own body and the life within it. If that requires circumventing my mother's authority, then so be it." "The matriarch has summoned the blood purity enforcers," Tarka added grimly. "They will arrive within hours. Once they're here, all embassy exits will be monitored. Then we move now," Jonah decided, surprising himself with his own certainty. Leon, what does Seraphine need to stabilize her condition until we reach the Institute? As Leon prepared an emergency medical kit, Jonah found himself alone with Seraphine for a moment. She regarded him with curious intensity. You have no obligation to involve yourself further, Captain Wells, she said softly. This situation is not of your making. I think the genetic analysis says otherwise, he replied. The analysis confirms biological contribution, not responsibility. Seraphine countered. By Aurelian law, responsibility lies with the one who initiated genetic exchange. That would be me. Jonah shook his head. Human perspective differs. Where I come from, parenthood isn't just about genetics, it's about choices, and I'm choosing to help. Seraphine studied him, as if seeing him truly for the first time. An interesting ethical framework, she finally said. Perhaps worth further study. Should we survive this venture? Their escape from the embassy required precision timing and Tarka's intimate knowledge of security protocols. The guard led them through maintenance tunnels and service corridors, bypassing the main checkpoints where Kasara's loyalists would be watching. Leon provided them with enough medical supplies to stabilize Seraphine for 12 hours. Beyond that, they would need the specialized equipment at the Luminar Institute. I can get you as far as the transit hub, Tarka explained as they reached a seldom-used service exit. From there, you'll need to take the public shuttle to the research district. It's not ideal, but the enforcers won't expect you to travel so openly. What about you? Jonah asked. Won't you be implicated in our escape? Tarka's expression hardened. I will return to my post and report that Lady Seraphine overpowered me during a moment of weakness. It will damage my reputation, but nothing more. That's not necessary, Seraphine protested. To come with us. My lady, Tarka replied solemnly. I can better serve you by remaining in place. Someone must monitor the matriarch's movements and warn you of approaching danger. Before Seraphine could argue further, her communication device chimed with an incoming message. Her expression darkened as she read it. What is it? Jonah asked. My mother has called an emergency session of the conclave, Seraphine explained. She intends to publicly announce my unfortunate illness and temporary withdrawal from succession rights. She looked up, her silver-violet eyes flashing with anger. She's laying the groundwork to remove me entirely if I don't comply with her demands. All the more reason to move quickly, Leon urged. The shuttle leaves in 10 minutes. With a final nod of gratitude to Tarka, they slipped out into the bustling transit district of Vega Prima. The public areas of the station were crowded with beings from dozens of species, providing a measure of anonymity that the embassy could not. Still, Seraphine drew curious glances. An Aurelian noblewoman in diplomatic attire was an unusual sight in the commercial sectors. We need to change your appearance, Jonah muttered as they navigated toward the shuttle platform. You stand out too much. There's a merchants district near the central terminal, Leon suggested. We could find something less conspicuous there. 20 minutes later. Seraphine emerged from a small boutique transformed. Gone were the formal robes of House Luminar, replaced by the practical attire of an Aurelian academic, still elegant, but far less attention-grabbing. A hooded cloak concealed her distinctive silver-violet hair, and specialized contact lenses dulled the luminescent quality of her eyes. Acceptable? She asked, turning to Jonah. He found himself momentarily speechless. The academic attire suited her in a way the formal diplomatic garb never had, highlighting the intelligence that had first drawn him to her work. More than acceptable, he finally managed. You look right. The journey to the research district passed in tense silence. Twice. They spotted enforcement officers scanning the crowds, but their disguises held. The Luminar Institute loomed ahead, its spiraling architecture a perfect blend of aesthetic beauty and practical function, much like the Aurelians themselves. There will be biometric scanners at every entrance, Seraphine warned as they approached. My credentials should still function, but they'll register my entry in the central system, which your mother will be monitoring, Jonah concluded. Precisely, we'll need a diversion. Leon smiled grimly. Leave that to me. I'll create a medical emergency at the public entrance, something dramatic enough to draw security's attention. That puts you at considerable risk, Seraphine pointed out. I'm the embassy's chief medical officer responding to a situation involving civilians. Leon replied with a shrug. Worst case, I'll face a reprimand for overstepping jurisdictional boundaries. Now, where exactly is this secret laboratory of yours? Seraphine's unofficial research space proved to be a marvel of ingenuity, a laboratory hidden within the infrastructure of the main facility, accessible only through a maintenance shaft that responded to her unique biosignature. While Leon created her diversion, a convincingly orchestrated allergic reaction among a tour group, Jonah and Seraphine slipped into the hidden lab. How did you manage to build all this without anyone noticing? Jonah asked, awed by the sophisticated equipment that filled the space. One advantage of being heir to House Luminar is that no one questions your research requisitions. Seraphine replied, already activating the primary systems. And maintenance tunnels are seldom monitored once they're certified safe. As the laboratory hummed to life around them, Seraphine moved with renewed purpose, her earlier weakness seemingly forgotten in the familiar environment. She calibrated instruments with practiced efficiency, occasionally instructing Jonah to adjust settings or retrieve specific components. This device, she explained, indicating a sleek cylindrical apparatus at the center of the lab, was designed to stabilize cross-species tissue grafts. With some modification, it should prevent my immune system from attacking the embryo. And is that what you want? Jonah asked quietly. To continue this pregnancy? Seraphine's hands stilled on the control panel. You're asking if I have formed an emotional attachment to a 3-week-old collection of cells. I'm asking what you want, Jonah clarified. Not what your mother wants or what Aurelian tradition dictates or even what I might prefer. Just you. She was silent for a long moment, her luminescence pulsing softly in the dim laboratory. No one has ever asked me that question before, she finally said. My entire life has been defined by what House Luminar requires of me. She placed a hand over her abdomen. This child represents something unprecedented, a life that exists outside the carefully controlled parameters of our genetic legacy. I find that I am curious to see what such a being might become. Curiosity is a scientific motivation, Jonah noted. Is that all this is to you? An experiment? Does it matter? She countered. If the end result is that I choose to protect this life, it matters to me, Jonah insisted. Because if we're going to face the consequences of this choice together, I need to know where you stand. Seraphine regarded him thoughtfully. Your emotional investment in this situation continues to surprise me, Captain Wells. Jonah, he corrected. If you're carrying my child, you might as well use my first name. A faint smile touched her lips. Very well. Jonah, to answer your question, no. This is not merely an experiment to me. While I cannot claim the kind of emotional response a human might experience, I do feel protective, committed, and perhaps something more that I lack the vocabulary to express. She turned back to the device. Is that sufficient? Before Jonah could respond, an alarm blared from the main laboratory's communication system, audible even in their hidden sanctuary. A security breach in Sector 7, an automated voice announced. All personnel initiate lockdown protocols. Leon's diversion must have escalated, Jonah said grimly. No, Seraphine replied, checking a monitoring screen. This is something else. The alert originated from the administrative level. Her expression darkened. My mother has arrived. The stabilization procedure required 30 minutes of uninterrupted operation time they no longer had. As Seraphine worked feverishly to accelerate the process, Jonah monitored the security feeds, watching as enforcement officers methodically swept through the institute. They're getting closer, he warned. Sector 6 is already cleared. I need 10 more minutes, Seraphine replied, not looking up from her work. The cellular binding matrix isn't fully integrated yet. We may not have 10 minutes. As if confirming his words, the laboratory's hidden entrance mechanism activated. Someone with override authority was attempting to access the sealed chamber. Impossible, Seraphine whispered. No one else knows this place exists. The entrance slid open to reveal matriarch Cassara, flanked by 2 blood purity enforcers. Her luminescence blazed with cold fury, casting harsh shadows across the laboratory. Did you truly believe I was unaware of your clandestine activities, daughter? She asked, her voice eerily calm. I have known of this place for years. I simply chose to allow your academic explorations. So long as they remained theoretical, Jonah moved instinctively to stand between Cassara and Seraphine, though he knew his gesture was largely symbolic against the advanced weapons the enforcers carried. Matriarch Aurelia, he began, struggling to maintain diplomatic protocol. Your daughter requires medical treatment. The procedure is nearly complete. The procedure, Cassara replied coldly, is an abomination against our most sacred laws. Step aside, Captain Wells. This matter does not concern Terran diplomats. It concerns me directly, Jonah countered. The child Seraphine carries is as much mine as hers. Cassara's eyes narrowed. Ah, yes, the unfortunate genetic donor. She gestured to the enforcers. Remove him. As the guards advanced, Seraphine's voice rang out with unexpected authority. Stop! By right of blood and succession, I invoke the protection of the heir. The ancient phrase had an immediate effect. The enforcers halted, uncertainty clear in their posture. Cassara's luminescence flickered with barely controlled rage. How you dare invoke the protection, she hissed. For a hybrid abomination? For my child, Seraphine replied steadily. Conceived outside traditional methods, perhaps, but of my lineage nonetheless. The protection makes no distinction regarding method of conception. The Council will never recognize such a claim. Cassara argued, they will strip you of your title and excise your name from the House records. Perhaps, Seraphine acknowledged, but not before I complete this procedure and ensure the viability of my pregnancy. The protection guarantees me that right, at minimum. For a tense moment, Jonah thought Cassara might defy even this ancient custom. But slowly, the matriarch's posture relaxed into one of cold calculation. Very well, she said. Complete your procedure. The enforcers and I will wait. A smile devoid of warmth crossed her features. But know this, daughter. When you face the Council, you will stand alone. Your indiscretion will not only destroy your future, but may irreparably damage relations between our worlds. With that ominous pronouncement, Cassara withdrew to the laboratory's antechamber, taking the enforcers with her, the moment they were out of earshot. Jonah turned to Seraphine. And what just happened? I invoked an ancient right, she explained, returning to the stabilization device. When an heir to any great house is with child, they may claim special protection until the birth. It dates back to our early history, when succession disputes often turned violent. And it works even in these circumstances? It creates a legal ambiguity that my mother cannot easily dismiss. Seraphine clarified. She's right that the council will likely rule against me eventually. But the protection buys us time. Time for what? Jonah asked. Once that device stabilizes the pregnancy, what's our next move? Your mother isn't going to simply change her mind. Seraphine's silver-violet eyes met his, determination evident in their luminescent depths. Our next move, Jonah Wells, is to change the rules of engagement entirely. The conclave reconvened the following day with an atmosphere of barely suppressed tension. Word of Seraphine's condition had spread throughout the embassy, transforming what should have been a routine diplomatic gathering into a spectacle charged with political significance. Jonah sat with the human delegation, acutely aware of the whispers and sidelong glances directed his way. Across the chamber, Seraphine had taken her customary place beside her mother, though the distance between them, both physical and emotional, was palpable. The stabilization procedure had been successful, restoring her natural luminescence and ensuring the embryo's continued development, at least for the near term. Matriarch Kasara rose to address the assembly, her expression betraying nothing of the family drama unfolding behind the scenes. Esteemed representatives, she began with practiced formality. Before we proceed with today's agenda, a matter of internal house governance requires brief attention. Jonah tensed, recognizing the calculated strategy. By framing Seraphine's pregnancy as a minor administrative issue rather than the unprecedented event it truly was, Kasara hoped to minimize its political impact. It has come to light that my daughter, Lady Seraphine, has experienced an unfortunate laboratory accident resulting in an unexpected medical condition. Kasara continued, her voice perfectly modulated. While this condition poses no immediate threat to her health, tradition dictates a temporary withdrawal from public duties. House Luminar requests the conclave's understanding during this period of adjustment. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The matriarch's careful phrasing fooled no one. The laboratory accident euphemism had already been decoded by the embassy's rumor mill. What happened next caught everyone by surprise, including Jonah. Seraphine rose from her seat, the gesture itself a violation of protocol during her mother's address. With respect, matriarch, she said, her voice clear and carrying. I believe accuracy is essential in matters of such importance. Kasara's luminescence flared briefly, a warning that Seraphine pointedly ignored. The laboratory accident to which the matriarch refers. Seraphine continued, addressing the entire assembly now. Resulted in my conception of a child, a hybrid child, whose genetic heritage includes both Aurelian and human contributions. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Several of the more conservative Aurelian representatives physically recoiled, their luminescence pulsing with distress. The human delegation leaned forward in unified interest, suddenly alert to the diplomatic implications. This announcement is premature and unauthorized. Kasara cut in sharply. Lady Seraphine speaks of a condition that will be addressed privately within House Luminar. I invoke the right of chosen union, Seraphine countered, her voice rising above the commotion. Absolute silence fell over the chamber. Even Kasara appeared momentarily stunned. Jonah turned to the human diplomatic officer beside him. What is the chosen union? He whispered. Ancient Aurelian custom, the officer replied, equally quiet. Rarely invoked, allows an heir to select their own consort outside traditional arrangements. Usually political suicide, Seraphine had moved to the center of the chamber now, standing directly beneath the hovering emblems of the 12 houses. In accordance with the ancestral laws that predate even the formation of the great houses, I claim the right to select my consort by choice rather than arrangement. Her gaze swept the assembly before settling directly on Jonah. I call upon Captain Jonah Wells of Earth to stand with me in this declaration. Every eye in the chamber turned to Jonah. For a moment, he remained frozen in his seat, overwhelmed by the audacity of Seraphine's gambit. Then, drawing a deep breath, he rose and moved to join her at the center of the chamber. Lady Seraphine, he said formally, aware that his words would be recorded in diplomatic archives for centuries to come. I accept your declaration. This is outrageous, Cassara interrupted, her composure finally cracking. The chosen union was intended for political alliances between houses, not this aberration. The ancient texts make no such distinction. Seraphine replied calmly. They speak only of binding two lineages through mutual choice rather than negotiated arrangement. Nothing in our law forbids that one lineage be non-Aurelian. An elderly representative from House Solaris rose from his seat. Matriarch Cassara speaks truly about tradition, but Lady Seraphine's interpretation of the letter of the law is technically correct. The chosen union predates our contact with other species. Our ancestors could not have explicitly forbidden what they could not imagine. Technical correctness does not override the clear intent of our biological preservation mandates. Cassara argued, her voice hardening. The purity codes explicitly forbid cross-species reproduction. The purity codes, Seraphine countered, were established 3 centuries after the chosen union rite. By our own legal precedents, the older law takes priority when direct conflict exists. Jonah watched this verbal sparring with growing admiration for Seraphine's tactical approach. She was fighting her mother on purely legalistic grounds, forcing the issue into the realm of interpretation rather than emotion. Even if your legal theory were sound, Cassara said dismissively. A chosen union requires the oath of 2 worlds. No human could possibly. I will recite the oath, Seraphine interrupted, a statement that elicited gasps from the Aurelian representatives. She turned to face Jonah directly, her silver-violet eyes intense. Will you join me in this, Captain Wells? Once begun, there is no honorable withdrawal. Jonah met her gaze steadily. I'm already committed, Lady Seraphine, lead the way, to the visible horror of many Aurelians present. Seraphine began to recite words in an ancient dialect that predated modern translation technology. The syllables seemed to resonate physically in the crystalline chamber, creating harmonics that vibrated through Jonah's body. When she finished her portion, she nodded for him to continue. I don't know the words, he admitted quietly. They will come, she replied cryptically, placing her luminescent hand against his chest. To Jonah's astonishment, he found himself speaking in the same ancient language, words flowing from his lips without conscious thought. The sensation was disorienting, like being both participant and observer in the same moment. As the final syllable left his mouth, a subtle shift seemed to occur in the very atmosphere of the chamber. The oath is spoken and witnessed, Seraphine announced to the assembly. By the oldest laws of our people, this union is recognized. This changes nothing, Cassara declared, though her tone lacked conviction. The Council of Houses will never accept. The Council need not accept anything, came a new voice from the entrance to the chamber. They need only acknowledge what has already transpired under law. Dr. Leon Thorpe entered, accompanied by Tarka and several other Aurelians Jonah didn't recognize. They carried scientific equipment and display screens bearing complex genetic diagrams. What is the meaning of this interruption? Cassara demanded. Evidence, matriarch, Leon replied calmly. While you've been debating legal precedents, We've been analyzing data from the Luminar Institute's own archives. She activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. These records, compiled by Lady Seraphine over the past 5 years, demonstrate conclusively that human Aurelian genetic compatibility is not only possible but potentially beneficial to both species. The display showed generations of cellular development simulations, each more stable than the last. The final models, dated just weeks before Seraphine's accidental conception, predicted viable offspring with enhanced regenerative capabilities and extended lifespans. Lady Seraphine's research indicates that selective cross-species reproduction could actually strengthen the Aurelian genome. Leon continued. The hybrid embryo she now carries represents the first practical verification of this theory, a living proof of concept that could revolutionize your people's understanding of genetic potential. This is irrelevant, Kasara insisted, though several council members were now studying the data with evident interest. Our laws regarding blood purity are not subject to scientific review. Perhaps they should be, suggested the elderly representative from House Solaris. If Lady Seraphine's research proves accurate, we would be fools to dismiss such potential advancement out of mere tradition. As the council members began to debate among themselves, the political winds visibly shifting, Kasara made one final attempt to regain control. "You have defiled our bloodline," she declared, pointing accusingly at Jonah. "House Luminar has maintained genetic purity for 17 generations. This contamination cannot be allowed to continue." "Mother," Seraphine said quietly, her tone cutting through the chamber's commotion. "House Luminar's obsession with purity is based on a scientific fallacy. Our bloodline has been artificially constrained to the point where genetic disorders are becoming increasingly common. Without periodic introduction of novel genetic material, we face a future of diminishing viability." She placed a protective hand over her abdomen. "This child represents not contamination, but salvation." The confrontation might have escalated further had the chamber's security alert not suddenly blared to life. Enforcement officers burst through the main entrance, weapons drawn. "Blood purity enforcers," Tarka muttered, moving protectively toward Seraphine and Jonah. "The matriarch must have summoned them before the conclave began." "All delegates remain seated," the lead enforcer commanded. "By order of the Genetic Preservation Council, we are here to take custody of Lady Seraphine Aurelia and the human Jonah Wells for violations of the purity codes." Jonah tensed, preparing for a confrontation that could quickly turn violent. But Seraphine's hand on his arm steadied him. "Now," she whispered, "when we run." Before he could question her, Tarka activated some kind of device that plunged the chamber into momentary darkness. When the emergency lighting engaged seconds later, confusion reigned in the chaos. Tarka pulled Jonah and Seraphine toward a service entrance nearly hidden in the chamber's ornate wall panels. "This way," he urged. "Dr. Thorpe will cover our exit." They fled through maintenance tunnels that wound beneath the embassy complex, Tarka leading them through a labyrinth that seemed designed to confuse pursuers. Behind them, they could hear the distant sounds of pursuit orders being shouted, security barriers being activated. "Where are we going?" Jonah asked as they paused at a junction to catch their breath. "The catacombs," Tarka replied. "Ancient tunnels that predate the embassy. They lead to the old scientific enclave, a community of researchers who operate outside official sanction." "You knew about this escape route all along," Jonah realized. "Lady Seraphine has been preparing contingencies for years," Tarka admitted. Her research made her cautious about official reactions. They pressed on through increasingly ancient passages, the embassy's modern architecture giving way to roughly hewn stone tunnels illuminated only by Seraphine's natural luminescence. The air grew cooler and heavy with mineral scents. Dr. Thorpe was supposed to join us. Seraphine noted with concern as they descended deeper into the catacombs. She chose to remain behind, Tarka explained grimly. She said her diplomatic credentials would protect her from the worst consequences, and her presence would buy us more time. Jonah felt a pang of guilt at the thought of Leon facing Kasara's wrath alone. We can't just leave her there. Dr. Thorpe made her choice, Tarka replied. As we all have. He paused, studying Jonah with newfound respect. You could have rejected the oath. Few would have blamed a human for refusing such an entanglement with our politics. It wasn't about politics, Jonah said, glancing at Seraphine. It was about responsibility, and something more. Seraphine met his gaze, her expression softening in a way he hadn't seen before. The oath of two worlds is more than a legal formality. Jonah, it creates a bond that transcends ordinary understanding. That you could speak the ancient words at all suggests a compatibility that goes beyond mere genetics. Before Jonah could process the implications of this statement, a distant rumble shook the tunnel around them. They're using resonance scanners, Tarka warned. We must move faster. The final stretch of their journey through the catacombs tested Seraphine's endurance. The stabilization procedure had strengthened her condition, but the physical demands of their escape were taking a toll. Twice she stumbled, her luminescence dimming alarmingly. By the time they reached the hidden entrance to the scientific enclave, Jonah was practically carrying her. The enclave itself proved to be a revelation of vast underground complex filled with research facilities and living quarters, home to dozens of Aurelians who had chosen knowledge over tradition. They were welcomed with cautious hospitality, particularly once Seraphine's identity became known. Your research has been followed closely here. Lady Aurelia, explained Dr. Nemeth, the Enclave's chief geneticist. Your theories on cross-species compatibility have inspired much of our recent work. Over the following days, as Seraphine recovered under the Enclave's specialized care, Jonah learned the full extent of the underground scientific community. For generations, they had operated in secret, pursuing research deemed too controversial by the conservative Aurelian leadership. Your child will not be the first hybrid born outside official sanction, Dr. Nemeth revealed during a private conversation. Though it will be the first with human lineage, and certainly the first born to a house heir. You've created hybrids before, Jonah asked, startled by this revelation. Not created, Nemeth corrected. Supported. Nature attempts cross-species fertilization more often than the Dominion acknowledges. Most fail without intervention, but occasionally, with proper medical support, viable offspring result. The implications were staggering. The Aurelian Dominion's carefully maintained image of biological isolation was, at least in part, a carefully constructed fiction. Does Seraphine know this? Jonah wondered. She suspected, Nemeth confirmed. Her research led her to question many of the Dominion's fundamental assumptions about genetic purity. It's why she began her own experiments. On the 5th day of their sanctuary in the Enclave, Tarka returned from a covert mission to the surface with troubling news. The diplomatic fallout from their escape had escalated beyond expectations. Matriarch Kasara had formally denounced Seraphine before the Council of Houses, calling for her permanent exile and the termination of her pregnancy. More concerning, she had implicated Earth in a biological subversion plot, claiming that Jonah's actions were part of a coordinated human effort to undermine Aurelian genetic integrity. The Terran diplomatic corps is scrambling to contain the damage, Tarka reported. Several conservative houses are calling for the suspension of all human-Aurelian relations. My mother has always been skilled at political maneuvering, Seraphine said grimly. She's transformed a personal embarrassment into a matter of species security. There's more, Tarka continued. Dr. Thorpe is being held under house arrest at the embassy. They're threatening to charge her with conspiracy against the Dominion. Jonah paced the small conference room where they had gathered. We need to go back, clear Leon's name, at least. That would mean certain capture, Tarka warned. The embassy is now crawling with enforcers. Perhaps, Seraphine said thoughtfully. Capture is exactly what we need. Her plan was audacious to the point of recklessness. Rather than hiding indefinitely in the enclave, they would return to the surface and demand a formal hearing before the full Council of Houses. By invoking ancient rights of succession and genetic determination, Seraphine would force a public reckoning with the scientific evidence supporting hybrid viability. The Dominion's power relies on controlling information, she explained. By bringing our case and the supporting research into the open, we deny them that control. It's incredibly risky, Dr. Nemeth cautioned. The Council could simply order your immediate detention and force termination. They could, Seraphine acknowledged. But that would require unanimous consensus among the 12 houses. And I believe several houses will hesitate once they understand the scientific implications. Jonah studied her with growing admiration. The Seraphine he had first met, the controlled, duty-bound noblewoman, had transformed into something altogether more formidable. A woman willing to challenge centuries of tradition to protect both her child and her scientific truth. What do you need from me? He asked simply. Your continued commitment, she replied. And perhaps a bit of human unpredictability when the moment comes. Their return to the embassy was deliberately conspicuous, rather than sneaking in through the catacombs. They arrived at the main entrance during peak diplomatic hours, accompanied by Dr. Nemeth and 3 other scientists from the enclave, all carrying comprehensive data files documenting their research. As expected, they were immediately surrounded by enforcers. What wasn't expected was the presence of matriarch Kasara herself, apparently in the midst of a formal greeting ceremony for a newly arrived delegation. Seraphine, she said coldly, her public composure barely masking her rage. You show remarkable audacity, returning after your disgrace. I come to claim my rights before the Council, Seraphine replied, her voice carrying clearly through the atrium. And to present evidence that will reshape our understanding of Aurelian potential. Guards, remove them to secure quarters. Kasara ordered. The Council will address this intrusion at their convenience. Actually, came an unexpected voice from the delegation Kasara had been greeting. I believe protocol suggests that claims of genetic significance should be heard without undue delay. An elderly Aurelian stepped forward, his house insignia identifying him as a senior representative of House Solaris, the same who had shown interest in Seraphine's research during the conclave. Elder Solarian, Kasara acknowledged stiffly. This is an internal matter of House Luminar. A matter involving potential evolutionary advancement concerns all houses, the elder countered. I move that the Council convene immediately to hear Lady Seraphine's evidence. To Kasara's visible dismay, several other House representatives nodded in agreement. The political momentum had shifted, if only slightly. Very well, she conceded with glacial dignity. The Council will hear this testimony, but the human will remain in custody until proceedings conclude. The human, Jonah interjected, stepping forward, has a name and rights under both the diplomatic accords and your own chosen union right. The validity of that union is precisely what the Council must determine, Kasara replied dismissively. Then I will speak to that validity as well, Jonah insisted. Unless the great Aurelian Dominion fears the words of a single human? It was a calculated risk, appealing to Aurelian pride, but it worked. Cassara's luminescence flared with irritation, but she nodded curtly. You may attend. Under guard. The council chamber was more austere than the grand hall where the conclave had been held. Circular space with 12 raised platforms arranged around a central presentation area. Each platform bore the insignia of one of the great houses, with House Luminar's violet spiral galaxy positioned directly opposite the entrance. As Seraphine and Jonah were led to the central area, escorted by 4 enforcers, the chamber filled with the senior representatives of each house. Dr. Nemeth and the other Enclave scientists were permitted to bring their equipment, but were positioned to one side, clearly designated as witnesses rather than principals. Matriarch Cassara took her place on the House Luminar platform, her expression carefully neutral as she called the session to order. The Council of Houses convenes to address a matter of genetic integrity. She began formally. Lady Seraphine Aurelia of House Luminar stands accused of deliberate violation of the purity codes through unauthorized cross-species fertilization. She further stands accused of invoking sacred rites under false pretenses to legitimize this violation. I dispute both accusations, Seraphine replied, her voice steady. And I present instead a case for scientific recognition and legal protection of a legitimate hybrid heir to House Luminar. For the next hour, Seraphine methodically presented her research, with Dr. Nemeth providing supporting evidence from the Enclave's extensive data archives. The scientific case was compelling generations of simulations and controlled experiments demonstrating not only the possibility of viable human Aurelian offspring, but the potential genetic advantages such combinations might offer. Several council members, particularly those from houses with scientific inclinations, leaned forward with evident interest. Others maintained expressions of rigid disapproval throughout the presentation. When Seraphine concluded, Cassara immediately seized control of the proceedings. While this research is academically interesting, she said dismissively, it in no way justifies the deliberate contamination of the Luminar bloodline. Our laws on genetic purity were established precisely to prevent such experimental deviations, regardless of their purported benefits. The laws were established based on the scientific understanding of their time. Seraphine countered, that understanding has evolved. Should not our laws evolve as well? Laws preserve order, Cassara replied sternly. They cannot shift with every new theory or experimental result. The stability of our society depends on maintaining our genetic heritage as it has existed for millennia. A heritage that is increasingly fragile, interjected Dr. Nemeth. House Luminar's own medical records show a 37% increase in genetic disorders over the past 3 centuries, a direct result of the limited genetic pool you so fiercely protect. Cassara's luminescence flared dangerously. You overstep, Doctor. House medical records are not subject to public discussion. Perhaps they should be, suggested the elder from House Solaris. If we face a genetic crisis, it concerns all houses, particularly those with whom we've formed marriage alliances. The debate continued, with various House representatives weighing in on both the scientific and legal aspects of the case. Throughout, Jonah remained silent, studying the dynamics of the council. He noted which houses seemed sympathetic to Seraphine's position and which aligned firmly with Cassara. The balance appeared precarious, with neither side commanding a clear majority. Finally, after exhaustive discussion of genetic theory and legal precedent, Cassara turned her attention to the chosen union right that Seraphine had invoked. Even if we were to entertain the theoretical validity of cross-species reproduction, she said, The attempt to legitimize it through the sacred oath of two worlds remains an unacceptable desecration. No human could possibly comprehend, much less authentically participate in a rite that predates even our written language. Yet Captain Wells spoke the oath in perfect ancient Aurelian. Seraphine pointed out, a fact witnessed by the entire conclave. A parlor trick, Kasara dismissed. Some technological assistance, no doubt. No technology was involved, Seraphine insisted. The oath can only be spoken by those with genuine connection to its meaning. That a human could recite it at all is unprecedented and suggests possibilities our ancestors may have anticipated long before we encountered other species. A convenient interpretation, Kasara replied coldly, but one without supporting evidence. Actually, Jonah said, breaking his silence for the first time, there is evidence. He stepped forward, ignoring the enforcers who tensed at his movement. I would like to address the council directly. Kasara's expression suggested she would refuse, but the elder from House Solaris preempted her. Let the human speak. If nothing else, his perspective may prove instructive. Given permission. Jonah moved to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of ancient alien scrutiny upon him. Honorable representatives, he began. I stand before you as both diplomat and accidental participant in what has become a defining moment for our respective species. I did not seek this role, nor did I anticipate the consequences of a simple handshake months ago. But having found myself here, I cannot ignore the responsibility that comes with it. He turned slowly, making eye contact with representatives from each house. When Lady Seraphine asked me to join her in the Oath of Two Worlds, I expected to stumble through foreign sounds with no meaning behind them. Instead, I experienced something transformative. The words that came from my mouth were not memorized or technologically implanted. They emerged from some deeper connection, a resonance between her mind and mine that transcended ordinary understanding. Poetic, but hardly scientific, Kasara interjected. On the contrary, Jonah countered. The neural synchronization that occurs during the oath has been documented by Dr. Nemeth's team. He gestured to the scientists, who activated a holographic display showing comparative brain activity patterns. When Seraphine and I recited the oath, our neural patterns aligned in a way that should be physiologically impossible between different species. This suggests a compatibility that your ancestors may have encoded into the very structure of the ritual, perhaps anticipating future encounters with species capable of forming such connections. The council chamber fell silent as the representatives studied the neural data. Even Kasara seemed momentarily at a loss for counter-argument. There is another aspect to consider. Jonah continued into the silence. The diplomatic implications of your decision today extend far beyond House Luminar, or even the Aurelian Dominion. Earth has maintained peaceful relations with your people for over a century, despite significant cultural differences. How you choose to handle this unexpected connection between our species will set the tone for centuries to come. He moved to stand beside Seraphine, deliberately taking her hand in full view of the council. We did not plan this child's existence, but now that it exists, we both choose to protect it, not as an experiment or political statement, but as a living being that represents something new in the universe. Something that perhaps was always meant to be possible. The chamber remained silent for several moments after Jonah finished speaking. Then, to everyone's surprise, the representative from House Astria, one of the most traditionally conservative houses, addressed Kasara directly. Matriarch Luminar, I find myself questioning our reflexive opposition to this development. If the human's words contain even a fraction of truth, we may be witnessing not a violation of our traditions, but their ultimate fulfillment. You cannot seriously suggest, Cassara began, but the Astrian representative continued. The oldest texts speak of a time when our people would find kindred spirits among the stars. We have always interpreted this metaphorically, but perhaps we were too limited in our understanding. Other representatives began to voice similar thoughts, the council's unified opposition fracturing visibly. Cassara watched with barely concealed dismay as the political consensus she had carefully cultivated began to unravel. In a final attempt to maintain control, she played her last card. Even if, and I emphasize if there were scientific and legal justifications for this aberration, the fact remains that my daughter deliberately violated the explicit directives of her house. Such disobedience cannot be sanctioned without threatening the very foundation of our hierarchical society. She turned to face Seraphine directly. As matriarch of House Luminar, I formally disavow you, Seraphine Aurelia. You are stripped of all titles, privileges, and claims to succession. You may keep your abomination, but you will do so in exile, with no support or recognition from your house or lineage. The pronouncement hung in the air like a physical presence. Jonah felt Seraphine's hand tighten in his, though her expression remained composed. I accept your judgment, matriarch, she replied with dignity. But know this, in choosing between dogma and truth, I have followed the highest traditions of scientific inquiry that once made House Luminar great. That legacy, at least, I will carry forward. As they prepared to leave the chamber, now officially exiles from Aurelian society, the elder from House Solaris raised his hand. Before this session concludes, I wish to register a formal position. While House Solaris respects the internal authority of each matriarch over their lineage, we do not concur with the scientific position taken by House Luminar in this matter. We would welcome continued academic exchange with Lady Seraphine and her research colleagues, regardless of her formal status. One by one, representatives from 4 other houses made similar declarations, effectively forming a minority coalition in support of Seraphine's work, if not her personal situation. It wasn't victory, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a first crack in the monolithic structure of Aurelian biological orthodoxy. As they were escorted from the council chamber, Dr. Leon Thorpe was waiting in the antechamber, her diplomatic status apparently restored. Well, that could have gone worse, she remarked with characteristic understatement. You're free, Jonah noted with relief. The charges were dropped once it became clear that several houses were breaking with matriarch Cassara's position. Leon explained. Apparently, it's bad form to imprison the physician of a coalition partner. What happens now? Jonah asked, looking to Seraphine. Now, she replied thoughtfully, when we build something new. The scientific enclave became their home for the months that followed. Seraphine's pregnancy progressed with careful monitoring, the unique developmental patterns of the hybrid child documented meticulously for future reference. Jonah found himself increasingly integrated into the enclave's community, his anthropological background proving valuable as they navigated the unprecedented cultural implications of human Aurelian integration. 6 months into their exile, an unexpected visitor arrived at the enclave's hidden entrance. Tarka, bearing news from the surface. The political landscape is shifting, he reported. Your coalition of supporting houses has grown to include 7 of the 12. They've established a formal research initiative dedicated to cross-species genetic compatibility, with significant funding and diplomatic backing from Earth. And my mother? Seraphine asked. The matriarch remains officially opposed, Tarka replied. But there are rumors of division within House Luminar itself. Several prominent family members have privately expressed support for your position. The most surprising development came 2 months later, as Seraphine entered the final phase of her pregnancy. A formal communication arrived from matriarch Kasara herself, requesting a private audience. It's almost certainly a trap, Jonah argued when Seraphine considered accepting. Perhaps, she acknowledged, but it may also be something else entirely. The meeting was arranged on neutral ground, a meditation garden in the public sector of Vega Prima, far from both the embassy and the enclave. Jonah insisted on accompanying Seraphine, though he agreed to remain at a distance during the initial conversation. Kasara arrived alone, without the entourage that typically surrounded her. Her luminescence seemed somewhat diminished, though her posture remained rigidly formal as she approached her visibly pregnant daughter. "You look, well," she began awkwardly. "The pregnancy progresses as expected," Seraphine replied neutrally. "The Enclave's medical facilities have proven more than adequate." Kasara nodded, her gaze drawn inevitably to Seraphine's rounded abdomen. "May I?" she asked, extending a hesitant hand. After a moment's consideration, Seraphine nodded. Kasara placed her palm gently against her daughter's belly, her expression transforming as she felt the movement within. "Active," she noted. "Like you were—" "The hybrid genetics appear to accelerate certain developmental milestones," Seraphine explained. "Cognitive function, in particular, is projected to exceed standard parameters for either species." "Always the scientist," Kasara said, a hint of fondness breaking through her formal demeanor. She withdrew her hand and straightened. "I did not come to discuss genetics. Seraphine, I came to offer an alternative to your current situation." "What sort of alternative?" "Return to House Luminar," Kasara proposed. "Not as heir that cannot be reversed without council approval, but as lead researcher for a new division within the Luminar Institute. Your work would continue under official sanction, with appropriate oversight." "And my child?" Seraphine pressed. Kasara hesitated. "The child would be acknowledged as of Luminar descent, though not in the direct line of succession. It would receive appropriate education and opportunities, commensurate with its unique status." "And Jonah?" At this, Kasara's expression hardened slightly. "The human would be granted residential status and reasonable access, but no formal recognition within house structure." Seraphine considered the offer in silence. Then, to Jonah's surprise, she beckoned him to join them. When he reached her side, she took his hand deliberately. "Mother," she said formally, "I appreciate the concessions you are prepared to make. They represent significant evolution in your thinking. However, they remain insufficient." Kasara's luminescence flared with frustration. "What more could you possibly expect? I am offering legitimacy, resources, protection. You're offering controlled inclusion on your terms." Seraphine corrected. "What I require is full recognition, not just of my child's existence, but of the fundamental changes this birth represents for our understanding of Aurelian potential." "You ask the impossible," Kasara insisted. "Centuries of tradition cannot be overturned in a single generation." "They can," Seraphine countered, "if those in power choose to lead rather than merely preserve." She placed her free hand over her abdomen. "This child represents not the dilution of our lineage, but its expansion. Not weakness, but new strength. The question isn't whether our traditions can accommodate such change, but whether you personally can see beyond fear to recognize opportunity." Kasara stared at her daughter, conflict evident in her luminescent eyes. "You have no idea what you're asking of me." "I think I do," Seraphine replied softly. "Because I've made the same journey from certainty to doubt, from rigid adherence to exploration of possibility. The difference is that I chose to follow where the evidence led, even when it contradicted everything I had been taught to believe." For a long moment, Cassara was silent, her gaze shifting between Seraphine, Jonah, and the visible evidence of their child. Then, almost imperceptibly, something in her posture changed, a relaxation of rigid certainty, a yielding to new possibility. A house Luminar has always prided itself on being at the forefront of Aurelian development. She said slowly, Perhaps true leadership now requires a different kind of courage than we have traditionally valued. She straightened, decision visibly forming. Return to the embassy, both of you. I will formally legitimize the chosen union and recognize the child as an heir of House Luminar, though in a special category to be determined. Your research will continue with full institutional support, and we will present a united front to the Council regarding the potential benefits of controlled genetic diversity. Jonah could hardly believe what he was hearing. You're accepting us? After everything that's happened? Cassara regarded him with a mixture of resignation and reluctant respect. I am accepting reality, Captain Wells, and adapting to ensure House Luminar's continued prominence in a changing universe. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. A trait my daughter clearly inherited, despite our differences. 3 weeks later, under the twin suns of the Vega system, Seraphine gave birth to a daughter. The labor was challenging. Hybrid births presented unique medical considerations that even the Enclave's extensive research hadn't fully anticipated. But with Dr. Thorpe and Dr. Nemeth working in concert, mother and child emerged healthy and stable. The infant was extraordinary. Her skin held the luminescent quality of her Aurelian heritage, but with a warmer undertone that reflected her human genetics. Her eyes, when they first opened, revealed irises of an unprecedented copper-violet hue that seemed to shift in different lighting. She's perfect, Jonah whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. The tiny being in his arms represented something entirely new in the universe, not merely a combination of two species, but the beginning of possibilities neither humanity nor the Aurelians had fully imagined. What shall we name her? Seraphine asked, exhausted but radiant in the aftermath of birth. They had discussed various options, both human and Aurelian, but nothing had felt quite right for a child who belonged equally to two worlds. Aurora, Jonah suggested. It means dawn in an ancient Earth language, a new beginning. Aurora Luminar Wells. Seraphine tested the name, her silver-violet eyes studying her daughter's face. It has balance, symmetry between our traditions. The official presentation of Aurora to House Luminar occurred 1 month later, in a ceremony that blended traditional Aurelian naming rites with elements of human celebration. Matriarch Cassara presided, her initial reluctance now transformed into a carefully calculated enthusiasm that positioned House Luminar as visionary rather than transgressive. Today we welcome the first recognized dual heritage heir in the history of our great houses, she announced to the assembled dignitaries. Aurora Luminar Wells represents not a departure from our traditions, but their natural evolution, proof that the Aurelian spirit can find expression in new forms while maintaining the essence of our noble lineage. It was a political masterpiece, reframing what had been considered abomination as innovation, with House Luminar claiming credit for pioneering a path that other houses would inevitably follow. Already, 2 other houses had quietly initiated research into compatible species, with humans at the top of the investigation list. The diplomatic implications extended far beyond Vega Prima. News of Aurora's birth and recognition spread rapidly through interstellar channels, transforming human-Aurelian relations practically overnight. What had been a cordial but distant alliance became a matter of intense cultural fascination on both sides. You've become quite the celebrity, Leon remarked to Jonah as they watched a delegation of human scientists being welcomed to the newly established Genetic Diversity Institute, formerly the Luminar Institute. The first human to father an Aurelian noble heir. There's talk of a diplomatic appointment, official recognition of your unique position. I'm not interested in being a political symbol, Jonah replied, though he knew that role had become unavoidable. My focus is on Aurora and supporting Seraphine's work. That work had expanded dramatically under official sanction. With matriarch Kasara's backing, Seraphine now led a team of 40 researchers exploring the full implications of cross-species compatibility. Their findings suggested that the successful birth of Aurora was not a fluke, but an indication of previously unrecognized potential for genetic exchange between certain compatible species. The boundaries we assumed were fixed appear to be much more permeable than our traditional science acknowledged. Seraphine explained during a joint human-Aurelian symposium. What we're discovering suggests that evolution may favor cross-species viability under specific conditions, perhaps as a natural adaptation to interstellar contact. Not everyone embraced this new paradigm. Conservative factions within several Aurelian houses continued to reject the legitimacy of hybrid offspring, forming a political opposition that questioned the reckless abandon of biological purity. On Earth, similar voices raised concerns about the implications of genetic blending, though they were generally relegated to the fringes of scientific and political discourse. For Jonah and Seraphine, however, these larger debates remained secondary to the daily reality of raising a child unlike any other. Aurora developed at an accelerated rate, her cognitive abilities particularly advanced. By 6 months, she was forming complete sentences in both English and the Aurelian High language. Her mind seemingly adapted to process linguistic structures from both heritages simultaneously. She's going to surpass both our species' normal parameters. Dr. Nemeth predicted after a developmental assessment. Her hybrid genetics appear to confer advantages we hadn't anticipated: neural pathways that combine the efficiency of Aurelian processing with the creative adaptability of human cognition. She's still just a baby, Jonah insisted, protective of Aurora's right to a childhood free from excessive scientific scrutiny. Her development needs to be guided by more than just research interest. Seraphine, somewhat to his surprise, agreed emphatically. Aurora will determine her own path when the time comes. Until then, our primary responsibility is to provide stability and nurturing, not merely documentation. This shared perspective on parenting strengthened the bond between Thema relationship that had begun with accidental genetic exchange and evolved into something deeper and more complex than either could have anticipated. The chosen union, initially invoked as a legal maneuver, had created connections between them that transcended ordinary understanding. They experienced moments of neural synchronization even without the formal oath, a phenomenon that fascinated the Enclave scientists but felt entirely natural to the couple themselves. It's as though parts of our consciousness were always compatible. Seraphine reflected during a rare quiet evening, Aurora sleeping peacefully in her specially designed crib. We simply lacked the framework to recognize it until circumstances forced the connection. Do you ever regret it? Jonah asked. The accident that started all this? Seraphine considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Regret implies a desire for different outcomes. When I look at Aurora, at the research now progressing openly, at the changes occurring throughout the Dominion, no, I cannot wish for a different path, despite the difficulties we've faced. Their peaceful existence at the heart of this evolutionary frontier was interrupted one morning by an urgent communication from Tarka, who had been formally assigned as Aurora's personal guard, a position of significant honor that reflected his early support for Seraphine's choices. "A situation has developed at the embassy," he reported, his normally composed features tense with concern. "3 representatives from the Genetic Preservation Council have arrived unannounced, demanding access to Aurora for standard evaluation." Seraphine's luminescence darkened with alarm. "The Preservation Council has no authority over recognized House members. They claim special dispensation based on Aurora's unique status," Tarka explained. "Matriarch Kasara is attempting to delay them through procedural means, but their documentation appears legitimate." "This is a political maneuver," Jonah realized. "The conservative faction making a direct challenge to Aurora's legitimacy. If they succeed in classifying her as a genetic anomaly rather than an heir, they could claim jurisdiction under the preservation codes." Seraphine agreed. "We need to return to the embassy immediately." They arrived to find the normally serene diplomatic compound in barely contained chaos. The representatives from the Preservation Council, severe Aurelians in the distinctive gray robes of their office, were engaged in tense negotiation with Matriarch Kasara in the embassy's main atrium. "The codes are absolutely clear," insisted the lead representative, an older Aurelian whose luminescence pulsed with rigid intensity. "Any being of mixed genetic heritage must undergo comprehensive evaluation to determine classification status. Aurora Luminar Wells has already been formally recognized as an heir of House Luminar," Kasara countered, her tone icy. "That recognition supersedes the Preservation Council's general mandate. No status supersedes biological security," the representative insisted. "The potential implications of unrestricted hybrid development must be assessed according to established protocols." Jonah, with Aurora securely in his arms, approached the confrontation directly. Seraphine moved alongside him, her scientific authority evident in her bearing. "Representatives," she addressed them formally. "Your concerns regarding hybrid development are understandable from a traditional perspective. However, they are based on outdated assumptions that recent research has definitively disproven. A research conducted by interested parties lacks objectivity," the lead representative dismissed. "Independent evaluation is required. Then by all means review our research." Seraphine offered reasonably. "The Genetic Diversity Institute welcomes scientific scrutiny. But Aurora herself is not a research subject. She is a recognized person under both Aurelian and human law. A person of unprecedented genetic composition," the representative persisted, "the long-term implications of which cannot be predicted without thorough study." As the debate intensified, Aurora, who had remained calm despite the tension surrounding her, suddenly reached out toward the lead representative, her copper-violet eyes focused with unusual intensity. To everyone's astonishment, her infant luminescence flared brightly, pulsing in a pattern that caused the older Aurelian to step back in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. "That pattern is Zama's ancestral." The pattern Aurora had spontaneously generated was one used in ancient Aurelian communication, largely forgotten in modern practice but still recognizable to scholars of historical traditions. It conveyed concepts of recognition and kinship across different lineages. "She's accessing genetic memory," Dr. Nemeth murmured, having arrived alongside several other scientists. "A faculty thought lost to modern Aurelians due to selective breeding practices." The lead representative stared at the child with an expression of conflicted wonder. "Our oldest texts speak of the luminous conversation, the ability to communicate complex concepts through patterned bioluminescence. It was believed extinct for 17 generations. Perhaps," Seraphine suggested carefully. "In our quest for purity, we eliminated qualities that natural selection would have preserved. Aurora's hybrid genetics may have reactivated ancestral traits that benefit from genetic diversity. The confrontation's tone shifted subtly after this display. The Preservation Council representatives retreated to consult among themselves, emerging with a modified position. They would suspend their demand for physical evaluation of Aurora in exchange for full access to the research data from the Genetic Diversity Institute, including ongoing developmental observations. A reasonable compromise, Cassara declared, formalizing the agreement before they could reconsider. After the representatives departed, she turned to Jonah and Seraphine with a rare expression of genuine respect. Your daughter continues to surprise us all. That display of ancestral communication was most fortuitous. Was it coincidence? Jonah wondered later, as they settled Aurora in their private quarters. Or did she somehow understand what was happening? Her cognitive development exceeds all established parameters. Seraphine replied, I believe we would be unwise to underestimate her awareness, even at this early stage. She gazed at their daughter with a mixture of scientific fascination and maternal pride. Aurora represents not just a blending of our species, but potentially the recovery of abilities both our peoples have lost through artificial constraints on our evolution. She is both a bridge to the future and a window into the past. As Aurora drifted to sleep, her luminescence dimming to a gentle glow, a communication arrived from Earth, a formal diplomatic recognition of Aurora's unique status, and an invitation for the family to visit when circumstances permitted. The message included personal notes from several prominent human scientists expressing their eagerness to meet the child who had transformed interstellar relations. It seems our private laboratory accident has indeed become a matter of galactic significance, Jonah observed wryly. Did you expect anything less? Seraphine asked, a rare hint of humor in her voice. After all, she is her parents' daughter. As they stood together watching their sleeping child, Jonah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From reluctant envoy to father of a hybrid heir, from academic curiosity to profound connection with a being from another world, none of it had been planned or anticipated. Yet standing here now, with Seraphine beside him and Aurora's peaceful luminescence painting the room in gentle light, he couldn't imagine any other path. The future remained uncertain. Aurora's development would continue to challenge established norms. The political currents within the Aurelian Dominion would shift and countershift as the implications of hybrid viability rippled through their society. Earth's relationship with the Aurelians would evolve in ways no diplomatic strategist could have predicted. And somewhere, on worlds not yet known to either humans or Aurelians, other species might be watching this unprecedented connection with their own calculations and concerns. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, Jonah Wells, accidental father to an impossible child, simply allowed himself to experience the quiet joy of family, forged across the stars against all odds and beyond all expectations. In her crib, Aurora stirred briefly, her copper-violet eyes opening to fix on her parents with an awareness that seemed to transcend her few months of life. Her luminescence pulsed once in the ancient pattern of kinship, then settled back into the steady glow of peaceful sleep. Outside the embassy windows, the twin suns of Vega set in spectacular convergence, casting prismatic light through the crystal spirits, a fitting emblem for the union of two worlds and the dawning of possibilities neither had imagined alone. Yet even as this new family found its equilibrium, a final transmission arrived from the embattled scientific enclave, a cryptic warning about unusual genetic markers appearing in Aurora's latest scans. The message was fragmentary, interrupted mid-sentence, suggesting interference or possible danger to the sender. Seraphine and Jonah exchanged concerned glances over their sleeping daughter. Their journey, it seemed, was far from over. The challenges of bringing two worlds together had only begun, with their child at the center of forces still unfolding across the stars. For Aurora Luminar Wells, first of her kind, heir to two worlds, bearer of ancient gifts and harbinger of future possibilities, the universe waited, watching with bated breath to see what she would become.